As Reverend Munro lights our chalice this morning, I invite you to rise, speak aloud our affirmation. If you are on Zoom, if you would keep muted also as you do so, the words are printed in your chat line. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need. For these high purposes do we unite in worship.
Well, today's May Day. And though it's widely observed in much of the world, who really celebrates May Day here in America anymore? Unions? Pagans? May Day is International Workers' Day, and it's a national holiday in more than 80 countries. It's also, as Lee Hunt noted, an ancient festival that marks the first day of summer in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, I personally think that May Day is a perfect UU holiday. And it's a holiday we need to reclaim and restore and passionately celebrate. Because May Day has become a suppressed and marginalized holiday. Yeah. And after all, May Day represents two very subversive ways of thinking about the world that I call the red and the green. The red is for the struggles of working people to organize and have some control over their lives. And the green is for life and our deep ties with the web of life on Earth. Great forests and vast grasslands once covered the temperate north, and every spring they burst forth in green glory. And what could our ancestors do but emulate our animal cousins and celebrate the greening of the world again? And they celebrated in May, named after Maya, the mother of all the gods and goddesses in the Roman pantheon. People went a-Maying, going into woods and fields and bringing home boughs and blossoms to decorate their homes, their persons and their loved ones with green garlands and flowers. I don't know about some of you, but I remember making little May baskets for my mother in grade school all those years ago. And of course, maypoles were erected, which represent the tree of life. And dances were danced, and music was played, drink was drunk, and love was made, and winter was over and summer had come. And it was a day of revelry, a day of honoring the life that coursed through both the world and the people, as Lee Hunt wrote. And May Day was clearly not a day of work. In fact, it's the most ancient workers' holiday of all. And of course, there were those who frowned on taking a day off to frolic in the woods and fields. In 1550, an act of the English Parliament demanded that maypoles be destroyed, and it outlawed the day's games as well. And in 1644, the Puritans under Oliver Cromwell, who by then had overthrown the king and taken over England, abolished May Day altogether, to great public outcry and more than a little resistance. But after the restoration of the monarchy, May Day was restored by Charles II to wide popular acclaim. But some years earlier in 1620, many Puritans had fled to New England seeking religious freedom. And in a rather ironic coincidence, these first pilgrims sailed on the Mayflower. In 1624, in a completely separate venture from the Pilgrims, a man named Thomas Morton settled at a place called Mount Wollaston on the southwestern arc of Massachusetts Bay. He was accompanied by a few free men and women and several indentured servants. And to him, the land seemed like a paradise. It was filled with life and beauty. Now, Thomas Morton grew up in a village in England's West Country. And village life then was a syncretic mix of Anglican rites and older pre-Christian rites, like the Maypole rebels, that hallowed and celebrated people's relations with nature and each other. And these were people with a deep antipathy towards Puritans. Thomas Morton renamed Mount Wollaston and called it Marymount. And he set about creating a community that modeled the English village life that he loved. And when he needed people for his colony, he offered to free indentured servants if they would join him, and I quote him here, "Join me as my partners and consociates, so you may be free from service, and we will converse, trade, plant, and live together as equals, and support and protect one another." And he couldn't help but notice that the local natives were also villagers, with whom he might have many things in common. And he got to know them as fellow human beings, and he thought far more of them than he did his Puritan neighbors. And again, I quote from his writings, "I have found the Massachusetts Indians more full of humanity than the Christians. The more savages, the better quarter. The more Christians, the worser quarter, I found, as all the indifferent-minded planters can testify." And of course, quarter is the old usage of the word for mercy or compassion. Some of the men of Marymount took native wives, and the village grew and prospered. And on May Day of 1628, the colony erected a maypole 80 feet high, decorated it with garlands, and wrapped it in ribbons, and nailed to its top the antlers of a buck. They brewed a barrel of beer. And everyone for hundreds of miles around, native and Europeans alike, was invited to the party. Morton attached to the pole the first lyric verses penned in America, which concluded with these lines: "The great earth mother's call none ever withstand, and yet that same love points this land with proclamation, friends. The 1st of May shall here at Marymount be holy day." This multicultural experiment was ended the next year when Puritan forces led by Miles Standish, who Morton called Captain Shrimp, destroyed the colony, cut the maypole down, and scattered the inhabitants. Religious freedom, it seems, was not for other people. The Puritans then began a campaign of conquest and eradication that would set the pattern for English interaction with indigenous America for centuries to come. Morton was illegally sent to England in chains. There are many historians who believe that the Puritans did not just destroy Marymount because of its lusty English country ways and its fraternization with the natives, but because in a few short years it had come to dominate the fur trade and become an agricultural and economic power surpassing Plymouth. And the reasons for that seem kind of obvious to me. After all, if you were a Native American, who would you rather trade with? Grim pilgrims who flogged people in the public square and thought you were savages, or transplanted English villagers who treated you with respect and danced with you around a pole with antlers on it? And which would community would you rather be a part of if you had a choice? Marymount prospered by fair means, as Morton would say. You know, we shouldn't romanticize Morton and Marymount as being a rainbow utopia in the wilderness, but we should consider how different America would be if his brand of consociation had become the norm. There were many such social experiments on the frontier, and all were eventually pushed aside by the forces of greed and power. Which brings us to the red. And the red of struggle is deeply rooted here in America. In 1884, the U.S. Federation of Organized Trade and Labor Unions passed a resolution declaring declaring that as of May 1st, 1886, an 8-hour workday would be the full and legal workday for all U.S. workers. Employers had 2 years to recognize this new standard and put it into effect, and they refused. So on May 1st of 1886, hundreds of thousands of workers took to the streets in a general strike throughout the country to force employers to recognize the 8-hour working day. Some of you may know this history. On May 3rd, the Chicago police opened fire on the unarmed striking workers at the McCormick Reaper Works, killing 6 workers and wounding untold more. The next day, at a rally in Haymarket Square, the police again demanded that the workers disperse. A bomb was thrown, 7 policemen died. The police retaliated by firing into the crowd, killing 4 and wounding hundreds. The bomb thrower was never discovered. And in a controversial trial, 8 prominent labor radicals were charged with conspiracy, and despite a lack of any evidence linking them directly to the bombing, 7 of the 8 were convicted of murder and sentenced to death, and the 8th was sentenced to 15 years in prison. It was a very dark time for the American labor movement, and it nearly destroyed it as public opinion was manipulated against them. But labor rallied, and they kept the struggle alive. 4 years later, May 1st, 1890, massive strikes were held throughout Europe and America, Peru, Chile, and Cuba, to demand the international adoption of the 8-hour workday. And since then, workers throughout the world observe the 1st of May as a day of international worker solidarity. People struggled and fought and died so we could have an 8-hour workday and a 5-day work week. And we should never forget that. But what's so important about an 8-hour workday that people would die for it? And the workers' cry was this: 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for living. Not 16 hours working for the boss and 8 hours for everything else a life needs, sleep and cooking and recreation. 8 hours for living a life. 8 hours to recreate. 8 hours to educate ourselves and our children, to read, to write. 8 hours to be with family and friends. 8 hours to think and organize. 8 precious hours to dedicate to a better present and a better future. Roses. But of course, people with the free time to think and organize are a threat to profits. So the employers fought back hard. And from the logging camps of Oregon to the mills of New England to the stockyards of Chicago, police and private goon squads intimidated, wounded, and sometimes killed workers and organizers. And when the employers and the government finally gave in, they fought against international solidarity. Labor Day in the U.S. was moved to September, and May 1 was proclaimed Loyalty Day. Anybody here celebrate that one? And this struggle is not over. From the sweatshops of Bangladesh to the fight for 15, people are still fighting for fair hours and living wages, for safe working conditions and decent treatment. And we who are better off must stand with them. The struggle for a better present and a better future goes on, and if we stop, we lose ground. And the red and the green twine together and strengthen and support each other in so many beautiful ways. Excuse me. There are those that would deny us that holy union, who would deny us our consociation with each other and with the other life on earth, who would deny us our full span of years filled with good life and the living of it, who would deny us those 8 precious hours and a fair wage and the right to self-determination. And because of this, green solidarity with nature and each other can only be realized through red struggle. But life cannot be and should not be only about work and struggle. That sounds far too grim and Puritan to me, and we mostly gave up being Puritans about 200 years ago. There should be dancing and love, and green boughs and flowers, and enough for all, north and south, east and west, no matter who they are or their station in life. There must be joy and play and laughter, or what are we working towards? So for these and all other reasons, let us celebrate May Day to the fullest. May it be so. Thank you.